follow Jonathan's lead and not standing up. I thank you for inviting me to my first town hall. I started at the Berkeley campus in July. Just a couple of points to reinforce the numbers that have been talked about earlier. The budget gap that we were looking at is $147 million. That's $116 million of new cuts and $31 million of systematic underfunding over the last decade. When we looked at what we did to address these cuts, it's been talked about the permanent cuts of about $82 million, the furloughs generated about $31 million, and the increase in fees and change in the student composition that Chancellor talked about for this year generated another 24. As I look to next year, what I feel is more pressure. While none of us have a crystal ball, we're 3 months into this fiscal year, and the state is already $6 billion behind in revenue. And so that means that the pressure we're feeling now isn't letting up in the short term. And that's one of the challenges that we all face as we continue the educational excellence as we look to next year. I think we're ready for questions.
To alleviate their burden in this problem.
So you're correct that that's one of the challenges, and we've been working very hard on that. You may know that I appeared on national television talking about this issue and making appeals for support. And I also, one of the things I was doing in Washington most recently was interacting with the legislatures to try to get the DREAM Act passed. And basically, if we don't see the DREAM Act passed, then we're legally constrained. Also, I've been working with 2 foundations in San Francisco and directing donors to them. So there are a couple of foundations in San Francisco who are providing support for our AB 540 students.
So are you saying that AB 540 students will see like a scholarship fund dedicated to them, or like what specifically?
Well, we're legally, I tried very hard to get that in place, and I was told we're legally not allowed to do that. Therefore, scholarship funds are being handled through 2 foundations in San Francisco, which are 501c3s. And we direct AB 540 students to those foundations. By the way, we twice have had bills in Sacramento to enable us to do that, and the last 2 years the governor has vetoed them. So that's another issue. We're campaigning in Sacramento to try to ensure that there's a change in policy and that the governor does not veto bills that allow us to channel financial aid ourselves directly to AB 540 students.
Thank you.
Hi, so I have 2 yes or no questions, but I wanted to first say that this notion that the cuts came as like a May tsunami, to me seems sort of absurd and misleading. Like, we knew there was an economic bubble. We have PhD economists on this campus, yet we did nothing. This is because privatization is part of an ongoing agenda. This was signed in 2004, in the 2004 contract that Russell Gould helped broker. And what this indicates is sort of political influence. There's not division between Berkeley and Sacramento. They're connected. The regents are appointed as, after they give donations to the governor. Russell Gould was the assistant in Governor Schwarzenegger's campaign. So to point at Sacramento without pointing at the Board of Regents is totally absurd. So my two questions are, 1, will you support Prop 656? Will you publicly support Prop 656? And 2, the second part of that is, why did nobody in the administration say anything about Prop 87, which would have provided sustainable public funding for the university? And why didn't you say anything about BP's $3 million to defeat that proposition? My second question is, yes or no, will each of you commit to to supporting a more democratic Board of Regents that's based on publicly financed elections and non-partisan.
As I'm sure you understood, the complete and entire thrust of our efforts with the Obama administration are to return us completely and entirely to being in the public domain. So if anything, our political efforts are to restore fully the public character of Berkeley, as you well know. Secondly, in terms of Tirico's legislation, my understanding is, of course, I support that kind of legislation. I didn't in the past because I would rather have the government actually fund us because we deserve to be funded, but obviously that hasn't been successful. My understanding is that to be appropriate for the University of California in particular, that there needs to be some refinement of that bill, and so we would like to see that. I'm actually not allowed to take a public position on bills. I don't know if anybody else does.
I mean, this won't be popular, you won't like to hear me say this, but I think the notion of democratization of the regions is a canard. It's not going to get you anywhere. Because the regents are not the devil in this. The regents did not, sorry, I disagree with you. The regents did not bring this crisis upon us. The severance bill that Alberto Tirico has sponsored, I support that. I think it's much too modest. The entire UC system would only get $300 million out of it. It's only a 1% as I understand. I think there's 4% in Texas and much more than that in Alaska. If it went up to 4% in California and you multiplied the 300 million by that, then we'd be talking about a meaningful stream of income.
Why have the people of California, why are they in denial? Why have they decided to abandon the public education system in our state? Why is the citizenry is not putting pressure on the governor? And what can you as university officials and what can we as students do to change how the people of California see this problem?
Well, that's not a simple question at all. It's a really challenging question. You know, I have to admit, partly I actually don't understand the progressive disinvestment by the state. I have some conspiratorial ideas which are a little bit paranoid about, but I don't think I want to be quoted on them connected with the change in the nature of the population in California. On the other hand, what can we do? You know, I think that politicians respond to pressure, and that's why I said I think all of us need to be, all of us, I do it already, but I think all of you, as I said, need to be, not just yourselves, but your family, your siblings, etc., need to be going to the actual offices of the legislators and demanding that they make a commitment to public education. And this is bipartisan. I think, you know, especially in a sort of liberal environment like Berkeley, there's a tendency to demonize the Republicans, but maybe be justified, but it's, don't quote me on that. But in fact, the Democrats recommended larger cuts than the Republicans did for the UC budget. And so this is really, I think, an extremely difficult situation. George, you're the political scientist.
Well, I think it's, you know, for the last 5-6 decades, survey research has shown that in general there's a tendency in the American population, the electorate, to want more services and fewer taxes, which is, you know, trying to have your cake and eat it too. So you sort of begin with that backdrop, but then you get to Proposition 13, which was an anti-tax revolt in the 1970s. And then you get the initiative process ballooning into a process whereby individual entitlements within the state budget got locked in, you know, K through 12 or K through 14 through Prop 98 some years back, and so on. And so it sort of boxed in or boxed out UC into a residual within the state budget, competing with social welfare, public safety, and prisons. And then you add to that the fact that the initiative process gave us the 2/3